blessing in a magnificent way. It is possible that God blesses us with more than we need so that we can help and bless someone else. When we think about 30-odd years, tells us God is using Nash to be a blessing one more year. We may have 2 or more church dresses so that we can share one with the woman who has none. Want to come to church just to give God thanks. We may have 20 pairs of shoes, and I know that happens in Dallas. But we can share some with the man who walks bare feet. We may have extra food in our pantry so that we can provide a meal for someone who is in need of a hot meal. That may explain the strange way that God seems to answer prayer. Sometimes we ask for one thing, He gives us something else, not even close to what we request. One author puts it this way: I ask for strength, and God give me difficulties to make me strong. I ask for wisdom, and God gives me problems to solve. I ask for riches, and God give me plenty of work to do. I ask for courage, and God give me dangers to overcome. I ask for love, and God gives me troubled people to help. I ask for favors, and God give me opportunities. I ask for power, that I might have praise for others. I was given weakness, that I may feel the need of God. I ask for all things, that I might enjoy life. I was given life, that I might enjoy all things. I received nothing I wanted, but everything I needed. As Christians, we know that our Savior has promised to hear our prayers, provide all of our needs. And when He goes beyond that, favors us immensely beyond what we actually need, He has another purpose in mind. Let's seek His purpose and follow His will, because God is still in the blessing business. I wish I had some witnesses in here. You're not here because you all of that and a bag of chips. You're here because God is still in the blessing business. He's watching over us. He's protecting us. He's guiding us. He's giving to us. And that tells us when we've come to this hour of celebration, we just wonder of how good God is to us. 30-odd years is a long time. God has given to this church so much that we can shout for joy and give Him the glory and let Him know that, Nash, you'll get more in 2018 than you have requested in the years past. Because God does not forget our good work. Oh, my time almost up, but let me tell you, God does not forget our good work. We got some of us of ebony color who forget quickly. I'm not talking to the judges. But God does not forget your good work. Your struggles, your time. I heard Deacon talk about visitation of the sick and praying in the morning and can't sleep at night because there's somebody in Tabor going through some trials, tribulation, the man of God stands in the gap on your behalf. The text focuses on Peter and John as they encounter a lame man entering into the temple. The lame man, according to the text, had been lame since birth, and a very familiar sight around the temple. Unable to support himself because of a physical impairment, the man asks for alms at the door of the temple on a regular day. I just believe the temple ought to be a good place to ask for help. Sometimes the temple seems to be a hindrance to help us. But this man finds himself in front of the temple, and he inquires of these disciples. He approached them and asked them for alms, and expected either to receive a coin or two or a rejection. Much to his surprise, the text indicates that Peter spoke to him and said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give thee. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." To the man's amazement, strength returned to his legs, and he was able to stand and walk. He asked for money, but he received something more than money. This biblical incident gives us a dramatic snapshot of God's providing for the wants and needs of believers according to his purpose. Suits God's purpose for the lame man to walk. He would be a witness to God's power. And you know, even at this hour, God still needs some witnesses to tell the story of how good God is to us. I've come to the conclusion that we are a people who refuses to tell the world how good God is, in spite of who's in the White House. We are to tell the world that God has been good to us, that he's brought us a mighty long way, that he's still providing for us, he's still opening doors for us, he's still clearing pathways for us, he's still blessing us so that we can be a blessing to others. Challenge this gathering, inclusive of our friends and visitors. When God raises you up, don't forget how you get there. Same God that brought you where you are is the same God that can take care of you after you're there. He's a God that will never leave us nor forsake us. The lame man did exactly as God wanted. He praised God openly and went into the temple to testify to the goodness of the Lord. It's like when the Lord does something, you can't keep it to yourself. When you know that you know that you know what he's done for you, where he's brought you from. Some of us, I don't know if I can say it, I can say it from the Bahamian point of view. When I think of where he brought us from in the Bahamas, from a fishing village, when one fishing boat went out fishing, brought some fish back to the settlements, to the Keys and Islands, and that boat fed the whole community. We don't live like that no more. It's all about me, myself, and I. But there was a time when we had a concern for others. And if I had a piece of bread, I shared it with those within and around us. That's what we ought to do as a church, is to lift up the fallen and care for the dying, to tell them of Jesus who's mighty to save. That's what this pastor has been doing for 30 odd years. He's been telling the story of a God who cares, of a God who wants others to be better than we once were. That's the kind of pastor that we have here at Tabor, a caring pastor. So I want to lift 3 points and bid you bye. First of all, the Bible has provided numerous examples of how he provides abundance to some for specific reasons. First of all, your pastor has overwhelming favor. Overwhelming favor. When you have too much of a good thing, it is easy to be overwhelming at the goodness and the mercy of the Lord. This often happens when we achieve a long sought after goal to receive a blessing that we desire but felt unworthy to receive. When I think of Nash and all that he has done, his time, his energy, his gifts, his talent, you can see that the church has been blessed, not only Tabor, but the community around Tabor has been a blessing because of leadership of Dr. Nash. But more than that, there is overwhelming excitement in the man called Nash. For when God has given us more than we expected, there should be an overwhelming excitement. You remember the woman at the well was given another chance, and she was excited. She was so excited that she ran through the city telling all she met, "Come see a man, told me all that I have ever done." The lame man in the text jumped and leaped for joy. He was excited about the goodness of the Lord. In a similar sense, believers who have received more than they expected or requested from God should feel some level of excitement just thinking about the goodness of God. When the Lord blesses us financially in a way we did not expect, it's shouting time. When a wayward child starts showering signs of hope, it's shouting time. When a lost family member finds the Lord, it's shouting time. When a preacher is healed by God's goodness, it's shouting time. When a pastor labors for 30 odd years, it's shouting time. Well, lastly, you ought to have overwhelming worship. The lame man of the text sat outside the gate for many years, but never went in. He thought all he needed was money to make it, and every day. But when he was healed, the first thing he did was praise God. Then he immediately followed Peter and John into the temple. For in the sanctuary, we who have received favor of God can lift him up and praise him with thanksgiving. For in the sanctuary, he who have been recipients of his grace can tell the world that our God is an awesome God. In the sanctuary, Nash, we who have been the beneficiaries of God's benevolence can tell the world that he will make a way out of no way. In the sanctuary, we can lift our voices in praise and give him our testimony that I was lost, but now I'm found. That I was blind, but now I see. That I was weak, but now I'm strengthened by the word. That I was closed out, but God opened the doors of opportunity. 30 long years, it's time to give him some praise. It's time to give him some glory. It's time to let him know that he's been good to us. Thank you for 30 years. Thank you for allowing your hearts to be blessed by a man of God. But finally, because of Jesus, we should be shouting. I can see shouting in this place. When I think of where God has brought Mount Tabor, there's a blessing in sharing abundance with others. That's why other people who give gifts want you to open them in front of them so they can see the expression on your faces. Well, goodbye, Mount Tabor, but let me remind you that the God who brought you up to 2018 is able, Pastor Nash, to carry you a little further. The God who keeps you running with nobody chasing you is able to give you strength to keep on running, keep on singing, keep on preaching, keep on telling the story that the God we serve, he's able. I wish I had a happy church. He's able to keep that which I have committed until that day. Keep on preaching, Pastor Nash. 2018 is going to be your best year because the God I serve ain't short on blessing. He makes me run with nobody chasing me. He makes me shout with nobody bothering me. He makes me cry with nobody around me. He's a God that makes a way out of nowhere. And one of these good old morning, when traveling days will be over, I want to hear him say to me that I fought a good fight, that I've kept the faith, I've run the race, and come on up higher, Dr. Nash. There's blessing in abundance. There's blessing all around you. There's blessing in you, blessing all over you. And that's why I'm so glad that my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I did not trust a sweetest flame, but holy lane on Jesus' name, on Christ, nobody else. On Christ, nobody else. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All of the ground, he's going to carry you a little further. He's going to give you a little better. He's going to make you a little lighter. He's going to give you a more happy life. He's going to take care of you in 2018. Keep the faith. Run the race. And when you've given the best of your service, telling the world that a Savior has come, be not dismayed if men don't believe you. He'll understand. He'll say, well done. But if you try and fail in your trying, and hand scoff and scarf from the work you have done, take up your cross, run quickly to meet him. He'll understand. Yes, he'll understand. I wish I had a happy church. He'll understand. He'll understand. He'll say,
hey, if you are in the city of San Antonio, Texas, I want you to come by B&B Detail Shop. If you need your tires cleaned, you need your car cleaned, you need the inside cleaned, this is the place to be. 1850 East Houston Street. Come on down. We're going to show you love as we love to wash on your car.
Could play
with the Dodgers.
Play with the Dodgers?
That's right. Played second base. That's where Jackie went to play when he first went to the Dodgers. So the second year he's in 47 or 40, 47. He told us, well, you got to find you another spot to play because we got a second base. And that was Junior Gill. They moved him to first base because Gil Hodges died. And when Gil Hodges played first base, he died. Put Jackie over there. Goose Tatum was the funniest fella that ever lived. Everything he did, it tickled him wasn't better than it did you because he really enjoyed what he was doing. He was my roommate.
Your roommate.
Yeah, he was my roommate. Well, I wanted the few could get along with him, say anything I wanted to him, and do anything I wanted to him. He never get angry with me.
And why did he leave baseball and go to the Harlem Globetrotters?
Well, he made more money.
That's easy.
See, we was in a hotel at the Ferguson Hotel on 22nd and Interstate in Annapolis, Indiana. A man named Babe Herman came in and threw $10,000 in the bed for Goose was. See, Goose could have made $1 million in Nebraska, Iowa, and all them little towns like that. He made $1 million. He wouldn't take it.
Why not?
I don't know. I know he was just a funny fella. El Dorado, Arkansas. I used to be pitching. He said, "Hum that rock radio, hum that rock." Yes, that's how he said to me all the time. Good fella.
Turkey Stearns, another great player. Stearns was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2002. He won 4 batting titles in the 1920s. He was a left-handed power hitter. He was also an excellent outfielder with a great arm, great range. Bill James ranked Stearns as number 25 of the top 100 players. There's a picture of Turkey in his Monarchs uniform. He was also played quite a bit for the Detroit Stars. Okay, I want to go over, I'm going to do some things here to focus a bit about how the book was written, why it was written. The purpose was to honor these 21 Negro League stars on the field between the foul lines for a full season of baseball. 165 plus games, plus playoffs, against 375 of the greatest players in baseball history from the 1880s to the 1980s. And when Satchel Paige was facing these great players, it was going to be best on their best season. That's why the book was called The Best Season. For example, when Satchel Paige faces Walter Johnson of the Washington Senators, the best pitcher in baseball history, 3 times in a 9-game series, he's facing the 1913 Walter Johnson, who won 37, lost 6 with a 1.14 earned run average. Now, as far as my background, I'm going to go over that in the last slide. The Lester Malloy Negro League Baseball Conference, Indianapolis, 2011. As I was writing my book, I was encouraged by Dr. Ray Doswell, the executive director of the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, and Dr. Leslie Heafy, the detail editor of Blackball, a Negro Leagues journal, to attend this conference, attended by about 100 or so baseball historians, members like myself of the Society for American Baseball Research. I could get some excellent feedback on my writing, as well as learn about the Negro Leagues from about a dozen historical academic presentations. My Honoring Blackball brochure was designed specifically for this audience. So in July 2011, I attended the 4-day conference in Indianapolis. It was wonderful being with all the baseball historians. Even though their focus is historical research, they knew that there was a place for what-if scenarios of historical fiction based on sophisticated game simulation. Let me give you a couple of brief stories from meetings with Monty Irvin and Dr. Blair. Monty Irvin, one of the things I asked him to share with my grandson Caleb when we met him a couple years ago was tell Caleb about the bus rides. So Monty says, we used to play 3 games in a day, and the 3 games would be played in 3 different cities. And they'd ride from one place to the other. In fact, sometimes in those hot days, and the uniforms were very warm uniforms, the old flannel uniforms. He says they used to hang them outside the window and they'd sit there in their shorts just to keep cool. But he also told Caleb, he says, you know, Caleb, I can sleep better on a bus than in a hotel. And why is that? They slept mostly in a bus, not a hotel. Well, let me just briefly here. Bill James put out a wonderful book for you, for baseball stat guys like myself, on win shares. It basically tells you the value of all the players in baseball history. It's a great book for saying, gee, who really is the greatest player? But using that book of Bill James, Mark Armour wrote an article called Major League Baseball Integration, 1947 to 1986. He was able to use that win share data. And in the first 15 years of integration, let's say from 47 to 62, as he did the comparisons, he noticed that the National League was way better than the American League over that period. And why was that? They did a much better job of bringing up Negro League stars. The great New York Yankees waited 9 years before they brought up Elston Howard. The Boston Red Sox, and I'm from Boston, they were the last team to integrate. They waited 12 years to 1959. What happened in the All-Star games during that 16-year period? 12 wins for the National League, 4 for the American League, because the National League did the job of going and getting these great players. This is important to me. I want to honor these guys, and I want to honor them like they'd be honored if they were at the ballpark. So bear with me. Who are these forgotten men? Cool Papa Bell, Oscar Charleston, Turkey Stearns, Cristobal Torriente, Monty Irvin, outfielders. Pop Lloyd, Willie Wells, shortstop. Judy Johnson, Ray Dandridge, third base. Frankie Warfield, Newt Allen, second base. Mule Suttles, Buck Leonard, first base. Biz Mackey, Josh Gibson, catchers. Pitchers, Martin DeHago, Bullet Joe, Leon Day, Bill Foster, Hilton Smith, and Satchel Paige. 19 of these 21 players have already been inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and Bill James ranks 11 of these players on the top 100 list of the best players ever.
The paintings in this series honor Negro Leagues players as superior athletes, not as storybook legends. As the Bible says, there is a time for everything, and in the 19th and 20th century, there was a time for Negro Leagues myths. Then, players toiled in relative obscurity, so it was sometimes necessary to exaggerate individual accomplishments so the white press and wider public might take note of what was happening on diamonds across the country, and indeed, the world. Thanks to the work of countless researchers, we now have a more complete record of these remarkable players. There are still gaps in the data, but what it does show is that the best players across Black and Latin American organized baseball were more than capable of sharing AL and NL diamonds with their white contemporaries. In 2020, Major League Baseball acknowledged Negro Leaguers as major leaguers. But this was not an elevation, it was overdue recognition. These players are compelling without need for embellishment, and deserve to be celebrated not as mythic figures, but as real people of extraordinary accomplishments. Relegated to the margins, they rose on their own merits, and continue to rise. Today we meet them anew, rendered realistically and in exquisite color by the brush of Greg Kreindler. In the years following the Civil War, baseball captured the hearts of millions across the United States, young and old, men and women, Black and white alike. In a country so recently riven by the question of whether it was right to enslave another based on the color of their skin, the game held great promise as a unifying force, a sport that not only developed strong bodies, but strong bonds as well. But even baseball, what many were beginning to call the national game, was not free from what ailed the nation. Black baseball in the 19th century arose as a reaction, indeed a rebuke, against the wicked current of skin-deep racism still endemic to American life. Built upon a foundation of bravery, brotherhood, and an indomitable barnstorming spirit, it defied the forces arrayed against it to grow into a uniquely Black institution that in time would transcend borders and transform the world. In 1865, Octavius Catto, an educator and early activist in the fight for civil rights, founded the all-black Pythian Baseball Club of Philadelphia. Serving as team captain and club secretary, Catto led the Pythian Club on road tours throughout the Mid-Atlantic in the summer of 1867, and that October sought membership in the National Association of Baseball Players. Despite support from convention president Hicks Hayhurst, a fellow Philadelphian, the Pythians were denied due to the color of their skin. Nevertheless, the Pythians played on, and in 1869 met the all-white Olympic Club, also of Philadelphia, in a contest described at the time as the first of its kind. Catto's campaign for equal rights on and off the diamond would be tragically cut short 2 years later in 1871, when he was attacked, shot, and killed by an election day mob. Just then, some 200 miles to the north, near Cooperstown, New York, a youth by the name of John Jackson was embarking on what would become a prolific ball-playing career. Known professionally as Bud Fowler, he'd make his minor league debut in 1878, pitching the otherwise all-white Lynn Live Oaks to victory over Tommy Bond and the reigning NL champion Red Stockings. It was Fowler's first triumph in a decades-long career as organized baseball's first Black professional. His pioneering work as a player, manager, and executive set a template for other Black pros. Men like Moses Fleetwood Walker. A star catcher for the University of Michigan, Walker would catch 42 games for the Toledo Blue Stockings of the American Association in 1884 to become the first openly Black player to reach the highest levels of organized baseball. He would also be the last for more than 60 years. By the time Walker's career ended with Syracuse in 1889, baseball's white establishment had brought the color line crashing down to block the emerging new generation of Black ball players from equal and integrated play. Among them, Saul White, a formidable infielder whose ball-playing ability was matched by his skill with the pen. White published his History of Colored Baseball in 1907. The book championed the rising strength of all Black clubs in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Even in the face of forced segregation, White foresaw a bright future for his burgeoning brotherhood of Black professionals. Urging players to take baseball seriously as a profession, he predicted, quote, "Honest efforts with his great ability will open an avenue in the near future wherein he may walk hand in hand with the opposite race in the greatest of all American games." White's history included an essay on batting by fellow 19th century star Grant Home Run Johnson, who, despite his nickname, encouraged a balanced approach to the plate. In 1894, Johnson teamed with Bud Fowler to form the Page Fence Giants, who would remain a barnstorming juggernaut through the end of the decade. In 1895, the Giants added talented second baseman Charlie Grant, whose star, together with Johnson's, would burn bright well into the new century. But as the new century opened, the most fertile ground for growing Black baseball was located beyond the borders of the United States. By the end of the 19th century, the baseball craze had spread to the Caribbean. The game gained major ground in Cuba in 1874 when Esteban Bayon, the first Latin-born ball player to play professionally in the U.S., organized a match between clubs from the cities of Matanzas and Havana. Cuba's Spanish authorities viewed baseball with suspicion, calling it, quote, "an anti-Spanish game with insurrectionist tendencies." They preferred bullfighting, but most Cubans embraced baseball as a symbol of freedom. And freedom followed, thanks to the shared sacrifice of Black and white in the Cuban War of Independence. The ball field triumphed over the bull ring. And in the pivotal season of 1900, Chino Moran led the all-Black San Francisco club to clinch the Cuban League pennant over Havana and the pitching of Luis Padrón, a victory that caused other clubs to integrate, forever erasing the color line in Cuba. During the winter season of 1906-1907, black players from the U.S. began bolstering Cuban rosters, as the likes of Pete Hill, Rube Foster, Charlie Grant, Bill Monroe, and Grant Home Run Johnson flocked to Cuba, drawn by a chance to supplement their income, hone their skills, and experience a culture free from the discrimination they regularly encountered in the U.S. Cuban players, in turn, formed friendships that opened opportunities to play in the States. Eustaquio Pedroso compiled a 2.51 ERA in competition against white clubs, including a no-hitter against the AL champion Detroit Tigers in the 1909 Cuban-American Major League Club Series. By the end of 1923, 20 of the 88 players participating in Cuba's 4-team pennant race were American Negro Leaguers, while 27 hailed from major and minor white leagues. That winter witnessed the greatest of the Cuban Winter League teams as the Leopardos de Santa Clara finished with a .766 winning percentage, paced by Cubans Jose Mendez and Alejandro Ohms, as well as American Negro Leaguers Oliver Ghost Marcel, Oscar Charleston, Dobie Moore, Heavy Johnson, Frank Warfield, Bill Holland, Reuben Curry, and Dave Brown. Cuba's combination of homegrown stars, visiting Negro Leaguers, tolerant playing conditions, and higher salaries made it a cradle for one of the greatest groupings of baseball talent in the first half of the 19th century. One of the most electrifying players to ever play in Latin America, or anywhere else, was Mississippi-born James Thomas Bell, who burst into baseball in 1922 as a 19-year-old lefty for the St. Louis Stars. Stars manager Bill Gatewood reportedly gave Bell the name Cool Papa after watching him calmly strike out feared slugger Oscar Charleston. By 1924, Bell had transformed from a sang-froid teenage knuckleball into a switch-hitting center fielder, using his lights-out speed to spur the Stars to 3 championships. Bell's winning ways continued into the 30s with the Pittsburgh Crawfords, whose 1935 squad featured 5 future Hall of Famers, Bell among them. Before the start of the 1937 season, Cool Papa and a core of Crawford Stars were recruited to play in the Dominican League as part of a super team sponsored by the dictator Rafael Trujillo. After winning that season's Dominican League championship, Bell spent the next 4 summers mashing in Mexico, capturing the Mexican League Triple Crown in 1940. Returning to the U.S., Bell remained a force well into his 40s, capping a quarter-century-long career by playing 4 stellar seasons with the Homestead Grays. For all his merits as a ball player, Bell was also known for his clean living and strong character. One former Crawford's teammate, Ted Page, remembered Bell as having been, quote, an even better man off the field than he was on it. The first 2 decades of the 20th century saw the construction of a slew of new stadia, but most black clubs of the era lacked the capital to build similarly fixed facilities. Renting ballparks while white teams were traveling was often prohibitively expensive. So, to circumvent these problems, black clubs turned to barnstorming, which meant playing nearly every game of their schedule on the road. In the East, Saul White's Philadelphia Giants emerged as a top touring club behind 19th century great Frank Grant and the speedy yet powerful Bill Monroe. Monroe's love of taunting opponents found a frequent target in the formidable Cuban ex-Giants, whose talented core coalesced around star shortstop Grant Home Run Johnson, whose long career had by now earned him another nickname, Dad. In the West, Frank Leland's Giants were next to invincible. That is until 1909, when the St. Paul Gophers captured the colored championship, helped by the fact that Leland star pitcher Rube Foster was injured. For Leland, worse was to come. In April 1910, Foster took control of the team from him in court. Already a star, Foster was well on his way to becoming a legend. In Indiana, C.I. Taylor transformed the West Baden Sprudels into some of the toughest outs in the West, moving the team to Indianapolis in 1914 to become one of Foster's fiercest rivals. Back east, the Brooklyn Royal Giants and Lincoln Giants emerged as top clubs, while the Florida Hotel League offered top players a chance to play for pay during the winter season. On May 5, 1912, J.L. Wilkinson's All Nations Club debuted as a truly integrated team. Composed of white and black Americans, Cubans, Japanese, and more, the All Nations traveled together in a private Pullman car, and in 1913 won 119 of 138 games, behind the lightning delivery of John Wesley Donaldson, the smoke-throwing wonder. A clean-living lefty, Donaldson played most of his career on the barnstorming circuit, Amassing at least 424 wins and more than 5,200 strikeouts, he was the perfect exemplar for black baseball's barnstorming era, a player whose abilities placed him in a league of his own at a time when there wasn't a league that would play him. That would soon change, thanks to one man's revolutionary vision. Born in 1879, Andrew Rube Foster emerged from his native Texas in the late 1890s to become one of the top pitchers of the new century. Midway through the 1902 season, Foster jumped from the Chicago Giants to join an integrated semi-pro club from Otsego, Michigan, his first experience playing integrated baseball. After continuing to play on integrated teams in Cuba, Foster felt integrated major league play was within his grasp. Shortly after seizing the Leland Giants, one of Foster's first moves was to take the team west, joining the California Winter League in 1910 to make it an integrated league of segregated teams, white, black, and Mexican. The 1915-16 winter season saw Foster's Chicago American Giants capture the California Winter League championship behind the batting barrage of John Henry Pop Lloyd and Pete Hill, who swatted 409 and 373 respectively. The formation of the Federal League, the First World War, and the Spanish flu pandemic all decimated the ranks of American National League teams in the 1910s. Foster hoped the major leagues would either backfill its ranks with black players or add 2 black teams and integrate along the proven successful model of the California Winter League. But even when faced with severe player shortages, white owners preferred segregation. Frustrated by this lack of progress towards a fully integrated major league, Foster established the Negro National League on February 13, 1920. As a star pitcher, far-seeing executive, sagacious field general, and stabilizing league president, Foster knew no equal. At the time of his death in 1930, the New York Amsterdam News lauded him as having, quote, done more to develop and promote professional baseball among Negroes than anyone else. The success of Foster's Negro National League was made possible by the tremendous growth of black communities in urban centers like Chicago during and after the First World War. Throughout the 1920s, fan bases in these communities would greet and celebrate black ball players as stars and celebrities of the first magnitude. Possibly the best all-around player in Negro League's history, Oscar Charleston rejoined C.I. Taylor's Indianapolis ABCs for the Negro National League's inaugural season. Meanwhile, pitchers Bullet Rogan, Bill Foster, and Smokey Joe Williams were masterful on the mound, while five-tool slugger Turkey Stearns and catcher Biz Mackey ensured the new league's firmament was bursting with stars. In response to Foster's Western-based Negro National League, Ed Bolden organized the Mutual Association of Eastern-colored clubs. Interleague competition proved fierce, as both circuits engaged in roster rating, much to the financial benefit of players like Southpaw Dave Brown, who in 1923 defected from the Chicago American Giants to the Lincoln Giants in the East. Ed Bolden's Hilldale Club dominated the Eastern League, led by player-manager Pop Lloyd. Nicknamed the Shovel for his superior play up the middle, Lloyd was sensationalized as the Black Honest Wagner. When Wagner caught wind of the comparison, he was reportedly flattered, stating, quote, "It is a great honor to be compared to him." In 1924, Hilldale met the Kansas City Monarchs in the first Negro World Series, losing the tilt only to emerge victorious in a repeat matchup the following year. The Monarchs, for their part, claimed they could have made more money barnstorming than playing for the Interleague Championship, and it wasn't just a case of sour grapes. Formal league schedules gave formerly freewheeling teams less flexibility, financially and otherwise, while old obstacles, such as a lack of fixed facilities, still loomed as large as they had at the beginning of the decade. By the time the stock market crash of 1929 ushered in the Great Depression, the Negro Leagues faced an uncertain future. In what appeared to be one of black baseball's darkest hours, the brilliance of one of its brightest stars would light a path forward. Born in Alabama in 1906, Leroy Robert Satchel Paige combined an outsized personality with career longevity to become the face of Negro Leagues baseball, playing on some 250 teams in the US, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. As the Negro League's top gate attraction, Paige knew his own worth, often jumping from team to team for a higher payday. Augmenting an arsenal of pitches and different deliveries with sparkling wit and a buoyant personality, Page smashed past barriers wrought by racial animus to bring wider attention to the Negro Leagues brand of baseball. In 1934, Page's presence integrated the prestigious Denver Post baseball tournament, wowing the white press with his performance. In 1935, Page and the integrated Bismarck swept into Wichita, Kansas to win the National Baseball Conference semi-pro tournament, again drawing praise at the national level. In 1946, Page continued to tip public opinion in favor of integration by participating in a coast-to-coast barnstorming tour with Bob Feller. 2 years later, in 1948, Page would make his major league debut with Cleveland, and later that season become the first player with Negro Leagues experience to pitch in the World Series of the formerly all-white league. Of course, Page had already taken part in a World Championship, winning the 1942 Negro World Series with the Kansas City Monarchs, a contest that featured 8 future National Baseball Hall of Fame inductees, Page among them. In 1926, Rube Foster, the Negro National League's founder, president, and guiding light, suffered a nervous breakdown from which he never fully recovered. Without Foster's leadership, and facing increasingly dire economic conditions, the Negro National League collapsed in 1931. But other major Negro leagues soon emerged. Even as team fortunes declined and salaries were cut, new stars were rising. Players like Sam Bankhead, Ray Brown, Josh Gibson, Crush Holloway, Buck Leonard, and Wild Bill Wright offered glimmers of hope at an otherwise bleak time. In 1938, Chet Brewer became the first American Negro Leaguer to play in the Mexican League. Brewer's sojourn south sparked a surge of black talent to Mexico, seeking, as usual, better pay and more tolerant playing conditions. By 1940, 60 former Negro Leagues players were playing in Mexico, including future Hall of Famers Cool Papa Bell, Willard Brown, Ray Dandridge, Leon Day, Martin Dihigo, Josh Gibson, Hilton Smith, and Willie Wells. Leading their recruitment was Jorge Pascual, owner of the Mexican League, who was ready to pay for top talent in a bid to form an integrated third major league that would challenge the primacy of the American and National Leagues. Pascual's efforts to woo white major leaguers with large contracts proved much less successful. However, this threat did add pressure to integrate the major leagues. Despite the steady siphoning of talent by Latin American leagues, US-based baseball executives held on, led by the likes of Alex Pompez of the New York Cubans, Cumberland Posey of the Homestead Grays, and Effa Manley of the Newark Eagles. Their tenacious fight for the survival of a second iteration of the Negro National League created conditions for success in the years that followed. In baseball, there's the good, the great, and then there's Josh Gibson. The preeminent slugger of the Negro Leagues and arguably the greatest catcher to have ever played the game, Gibson is credited with swatting over 800 home runs in 17 seasons against all levels of competition, stats that set him on a path to winning a combined 11 pennants while playing for his hometown Pittsburgh Crawfords and Homestead Grays. In the early 1930s, Gibson helped make Puerto Rico a popular winter league destination. And as a midseason addition to the Dominican League's Dream Team Dragones in 1937, he stabilized a squad of Negro League stars to lead the club from the cellar to a championship. In a career that took him from Cuba to Mexico to Venezuela, Gibson played his final game in 1946, passing away just before getting a chance to play integrated ball at the major league level. He was 35, and to many millions, the greatest hitter who ever lived. Despite the uncertainty that defined the 1930s, black baseball roared into the 1940s as an economic force in black communities and a factor for social change nationwide. In Pittsburgh, power-hitting lefty Buck Leonard teamed with Josh Gibson to give the Homestead Grays lineup the greatest 1-2 punch since Ruth and Gehrig, while the black-owned Pittsburgh Courier promoted the Double V campaign, victory over fascism abroad and over discrimination at home, pressuring society to remember shared wartime sacrifices. Fans of black baseball in the 1940s watched some of the greatest players in the history of the game, as stars like Satchel Paige, Buck O'Neill, Willard Brown, and many others attracted the attention and adulation of new audiences nationwide.
Hey, if you are in the city of San Antonio, Texas, I want you to come by B&B Detail Shop. If you need your tires cleaned, you need your car cleaned, you need the inside cleaned, this is the place to be. 1850 East Houston Street. Come on down. We're going to show you love as we love to wash on your car.
Nobody does it better. They can come closer than close, yeah.
Star power and an ever-rising tide of domestic and international talent made it clear that black baseball offered an on-field product that was the best in the world, unrivaled even by the presumptively superior segregated white major leagues. Dubbed the Dominican Deer for his foot speed, Totelo Vargas leapt to the front as the best Dominican-born player of the era, while his New York Cubans teammate Pancho Coimbre was lauded as the best to emerge from Puerto Rico. A mere 15 years old when he signed with the Washington Elite Giants in 1937, Roy Campanella followed the club to Baltimore the next season, and 4 years later was selected to play in the prestigious East-West All-Star Game. Another rising star of the era was Larry Doby, who batted .356 and slugged .582 as part of the 1946 champion New York Eagles. Mere months after Jackie Robinson's historic 1947 NL debut, Doby became the first black player in the American League, and would remain an AL mainstay for the next decade. The excellence of black baseball during wartime created a spectacle that was impossible to ignore. The story of Jackie Robinson's rise to break the color line was intertwined with the Negro League's greatness, and indeed its greatest lasting legacy. Jackie Robinson's 1945 tenure with the Kansas City Monarchs was brief. He played in only 35 league games, for which we have box scores. But Robinson's impact on the Negro Leagues and the Negro League's impact on Robinson were both writ large. In August 1945, Branch Rickey signed Robinson to a contract to play for the Montreal Royals, the Brooklyn Dodgers AAA farm club. Though the signing would not be announced until October, it effectively ended Robinson's Negro League career just 3 months after it began. Rickey felt no obligation towards the Negro Leagues and did not compensate the Monarchs for signing Robinson. Due to the color of their skin, the Monarchs were excluded from the national agreement governing organized baseball. Rickey regarded the Negro Leagues, including the highly successful Monarchs, as illegitimate and, quote, in the zone of a racket. Despite the circumstances of the signing, Negro Leagues players rallied around Robinson, with two important considerations. First, if Robinson failed, there was no telling when the next chance would come to break the color line. And secondly, that Robinson was not yet ready to make the jump to a major league stage. Baseball was his worst sport. Between leaving UCLA in 1941 and joining the Monarchs in 1945, the only semi-pro sports he played were basketball and football, two sports in which he truly excelled. It was Chet Brewer who changed that. A former standout pitcher for the Monarchs, Brewer was now manager of the Kansas City Royals, a perennial entrant in the California Winter League. He was determined to help Robinson improve his game by securing him a spot on the Royals roster. Amid a swell of post-war enthusiasm, the California Winter League opened its 7-week season in September 1945, with Robinson starting as the Royal shortstop. With the press documenting his every move, Robinson enjoyed a successful season. But Negro Leagues players and Dodgers brass shared the sentiment that even while making great strides, Robinson still needed more seasoning. That same winter, he joined a Negro League All-Star team on a tour of Venezuela to hone his skills away from the scrutiny of the press. The American All-Stars, or Las Estrellas Negras, were built to mentor Robinson, instructing him in the finer points of the game. Robinson's roommate, Gene Benson, a veteran outfielder and contact hitter supreme, taught him to hit the curveball, Robinson's most glaring weakness as a player to that point. Negro Leagues players showered Robinson with advice, attention, and instruction because they knew that with a chance to smash the color line, failure was not an option. And with the right preparation, Robinson had the mental makeup and all-around abilities to shoulder the awesome responsibility of being the one to do so. From the time Jackie Robinson debuted for Brooklyn in 1947, it would be more than 12 years until the Boston Red Sox became the last Major League team to integrate its roster. In a 7-year stretch from 1947 to 1953, the National League added black players at a rate of 3 every 2 years, and the American League at a rate of just 1 every 2 years. Teams were slow to add black and Latin American players to their rosters through a combination of financial and social factors. Some teams kept quotas, while others never gave proven stars the chance they deserved. Although more than capable of playing in the majors, the great Ray Dandridge never got the call to the big leagues and spent the last years of his career as the premier player in AAA. Integration had arrived, just barely. But too often, veteran Negro Leaguers like Dandridge were dismissed as being too old for the new era. It remains somewhat surprising that more teams did not take advantage of the Negro Leagues as a new source of talent, especially when one considers the immediate contributions and achievements of Black and Latino players. Desegregated baseball meant rising talents like Elston Howard and Ernie Banks could now take their deserved place as stars for some of the most storied, previously all-white franchises. But it also sounded a death knell for the Negro Leagues as a successful business enterprise. The second iteration of the Negro National League disbanded in 1948. The Negro American League continued into the 50s, but attempts to sign white players and women had little lasting impact on gate receipts. Nevertheless, the fading years of Negro League baseball were witness to many more firsts. Mamie Peanut Johnson became the only woman to pitch in the Negro Leagues as a member of the 1953 Indianapolis Clowns. The speedy Connie Morgan joined the Clowns the following season. In 1954, as a member of the Kansas City Monarchs.
Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is the 1926 Cleveland Elites Negro National League baseball season. This was the third Negro League team that Cleveland had after the Cleveland Tate Stars and the Cleveland Browns. There was no team in 1925. So this was a new team. The Cleveland Elites played in the Negro National League, and they were playing home games in Cleveland at Hooper Field at East 55th, Woodland, and Central Avenue. And they had a tough year. They finished in 8th place with a record of 5-32, winning percentage of .135, 51 games out of first. The first place team was the Kansas City Monarchs, who were 56-19, winning percentage of .747, really something. The second place team, the Chicago American Giants, were 57-23. Third place, the St. Louis Stars, 49-29. Fourth place, the Detroit Stars, 46-30. Fifth place, the Indianapolis ABCs, 43-43. Sixth place, the Cuban Stars West, 16-47. Seventh place, the Dayton Marcos, 7-32. And in eighth and last place, the Cleveland Elites were 5-32. They are also known as the Cleveland Elite Giants. Now they did not, play well. They had a very poor record, and by the end of June, only 5 players were left from the opening day roster. The decision was made to completely dismantle and rebuild the club in the middle of the season. Now, in 1926, league president and founder Rube Foster was hospitalized. He had a tragic accident. He was exposed to gas in a hotel room and almost killed him. Anyway, he developed mental illness and was hospitalized, and this was a horrible crisis for the whole league because he was such a strong personality, and there was a lack of central authority to force players and teams to play by the rules. So there were real problems because of that. There was no real league leadership. In a September game against the Detroit Stars, the Cleveland Elites scored 6 runs in the bottom of the 9th to win the game 9-7. Cleveland, despite their poor record in league games, had a very strong record against local semi-pro teams in Cleveland. And then the Cleveland Elites folded after the season. It was just 1 year. The owner of the Elites was Sam Shepard. Before the season, Shepard traveled to Texas, Arkansas, and Memphis, Tennessee to recruit and sign players. And on that trip, he signed 6 fellows who played for the Cleveland Elites. Now, for the first half of the season, the manager was Candy Jim Taylor, who played some third base and was, as I said, a player manager. He had been with the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1922 and again back in Cleveland with the Elites in 26. And he continued in the Negro. This was his last year in Cleveland. He continued in the Negro Leagues as a player and manager until his death in 1948. And in 1926, he had a strong year. He had 377, 26 and 69 at bats. He scored 3 runs, 2 doubles, 8 RBIs, and 8 walks. He also did a little pitching, had no decisions in 4 innings pitched, and had 3 strikeouts. Candy Jim Taylor. Now, for the second half of the season, Frank Duncan, who was often called Pete Duncan, was the player manager. He was a catcher and an outfielder, and he batted .259 for the Cleveland Elites with 14 hits and 54 at-bats. He scored 7 runs, had 8 doubles, a home run, 3 RBIs, a stolen base in 6 walks. Pete Duncan played for the Philadelphia Giants, Leland Giants, Chicago American Giants, the Detroit Stars, Chicago Giants, Toledo Tigers, Milwaukee Bears, Cleveland Elites, the Cleveland Hornets, and the Cleveland Tigers between 1909 and 1928. He was a good bunter and a fast base runner and very popular with the fans, a very reliable outfielder, and he had all-around ability with a great arm, was an outstanding leadoff man. He hit .345 in Cuba during the winter of 1915 to 1916, and .382 with the Royal Ponciana team in the Florida Hotel League in West Palm Beach, Florida, in the winter of 1917 and 1918. He's also the manager of the Cleveland Hornets in 1927 and the Cleveland Tigers in 1928. For his career, he hit .291 with 147 hits, 34 doubles, 5 triples, 3 home runs, 55 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, and 551 at-bats. Those are very incomplete Negro League statistics, which is a frustrating thing when you're trying to study these players. He became manager of the Elites halfway through the season. In the Gazette newspaper in Cleveland, a black newspaper, Duncan was written, Duncan took control of the team, quote, that had not been able to define the word victory, pulled it out of its lethargic state, and made it one of the most feared diamond outfits in the vicinity. Pete Duncan with the Kansas City Monarchs, and when he was playing for them, at one year they were in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and the children were helping the players carry their equipment. And the newspaper wrote, quote, Frank Duncan resembles a Pied Piper since it requires a small battalion to carry his vast array of catching equipment. In the 1942 Negro World Series, Frank Duncan was the Kansas City Monarchs manager. In Game 2 in the 7th inning, his pitcher Satchel Paige decided with one man on to intentionally walk 2 players and load the bases and face the tremendous Josh Gibson. There was a conference on the mound, and Buck O'Neill, the first baseman, said, "Oh, man, you got to be crazy." And Duncan responded, quote, Listen, Buck, you know all these people we got in this ballpark? They came to see Satchel and Josh. So whatever he wants to do, let him do it. And there were 2 outs, and Satchel Paige proceeded to strike out Josh Gibson in an incredible moment in Negro League baseball history. Most of his career play, he was manager of the Kansas City Monarchs. He was an outstanding catcher, and he was also the Kansas City Monarchs. And when Jackie Robinson played for them and then left to sign with the Montreal Royals, who were a minor league team for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and then, of course, played for Brooklyn and integrated Major League Baseball. Frank Duncan. Now, the starting lineup, Robert Bonner was the catcher. Bonner batted .216 with 30 hits and 139 at-bats. He scored 12 runs, had 6 doubles, a triple, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 12 walks. And Bonner was with the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1922, the Cleveland Browns in 1924, and back in Cleveland with the Elites in 1926. Robert Bonner. Charles Zamfier was the first baseman, although in his career he was mostly a second baseman. Zamfier batted .213 with 17 hits and 80 at-bats. He scored 21 runs, had a double, a triple, a home run, 5 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, and 12 walks. During his career, he played third base, shortstop, first base, right field, left field, pitcher, and umpire. He played for the Cleveland Elites, the Cleveland Hornets, the Birmingham Black Barons, the Cuban Stars West, the St. Louis Stars, the Cleveland Tigers, Detroit Stars, Memphis Red Sox, and Cleveland Cubs between 1926 and 1931. They called him Zomp. He was born in 1905 and died in 1973 in St. Louis, Missouri at age 68. Very versatile player. It was alleged that he hit .480 one year, which has not been confirmed. He organized the St. Louis Umpires Association in 1940 and was inducted into the Greater St. Louis Amateur Baseball Hall of Fame. As a pitcher, in 1926, he had no decisions, pitched 2 innings, and allowed 3 runs. In his career, he had 148 hits, 16 doubles, 3 triples, 4 home runs, 14 RBIs, 13 stolen bases, and 606 at-bats. Charles Zamfier. Bill Owens was the second baseman. Owens batted .333 with 35 hits and 105 at-bats. He scored 9 runs, had 6 doubles, 2 triples, 3 stolen bases, and 5 walks. In his career, he was a shortstop, second baseman, third baseman, and pitcher. Owens played for the Washington Potomacs, the Wilmington Potomacs, Chicago American Giants, Indianapolis ABCs, Dayton Marcos, Cleveland Elites, Cleveland Hornets, Harrisburg Giants, the Brooklyn Royal Giants, Birmingham Black Barons, Memphis Red Sox, and Detroit Stars between 1923 and 1933. He had a good glove, a strong arm. He lacked offensive punch. He was a native of Indianapolis, Indiana. In 1933, he was criticized by his manager that year, Candy Jim Taylor, in Indianapolis in front of his hometown fans, and he quit the team and retired. He got fed up. As an older man, he was the last living player in the Eastern Colored League at one time. He was born in 1901 in Hawesville, Indiana, and died in 1999 in Indianapolis, Indiana, at age 99. For his career, he had 322 hits, 36 doubles, 13 triples, 14 RBIs, 20 stolen bases, and 1,328 at-bats. Bill Owens. John Hamilton was the third baseman. Hamilton batted .314 with 33 hits and 105 at-bats. He scored 12 runs, had 8 doubles, a triple, a home run, 3 RBIs, a stolen base, and a walk. During his career, Hamilton was a second baseman, shortstop, and a third baseman for the Washington Potomacs, Wilmington Potomacs, Indianapolis ABCs, Cleveland Elites, Birmingham Black Barons, and Memphis Red Sox between 1924 and 1927. He was the best shortstop. One time he was the best shortstop in Texas as a young man. He was born in Dallas, Texas. During his career, he had 262 hits with 113 runs scored, 35 doubles, 4 triples, 8 home runs, 52 RBIs, 27 stolen bases in 1,008 at-bats. John Hamilton. Bobby Robinson was the shortstop. He also played some third base. He batted 180 with 34 hits and 189 at-bats. He scored 16 runs with 5 doubles, a triple, 2 home runs, 4 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, and 16 walks. Robinson played for the Indianapolis ABCs, the Cleveland Elites, Chicago American Giants, the Birmingham Black Barons, Memphis Red Sox, Detroit Stars, Baltimore Black Sox, Cleveland Stars, the Cleveland Giants, and the Cleveland Red Sox, and St. Louis Stars between 1925 and 1941. He was 6 foot flat and 170 pounds, had a very good glove. At third base, they called him the human vacuum cleaner, which also, years later, they called Brooks Robinson was called that. He grew up in Mobile, Alabama, was a mediocre hitter with fair power. After he retired, he became a brick mason for 30 years and settled in Chicago. Born in 1903 in Whistler, Alabama, for his career, he had 460 hits, scored 225 runs, 57 doubles, 21 triples, 9 home runs, 46 RBIs, 40 stolen bases, and 1,908 at-bats. Bobby Robinson. Jack Summers was in left field. Summers batted .289 with 28 hits and 97 at-bats. He scored 6 runs, had 4 doubles, a triple, a home run, 2 RBIs, a stolen base, and 4 walks. Summers played for the Cleveland Browns in 1924, the Cleveland Elites in 1926, the Cleveland Hornets in 1927, and the Cleveland Tigers in 1928. Jack Summers. Ernest Duff was the center fielder. He also was a catcher. He batted .287 with 31 hits and 108 at-bats, scored 10 runs, had 2 doubles, 2 triples, an RBI, 5 stolen bases, and 5 walks. During his career, he played right field, left field, center field, catcher, second base, and first base. Played for the Indianapolis ABCs, Cleveland Elites, Cleveland Hornets, Cleveland Tigers, and Cuban Stars between 1925 and 1932. For his career, he batted .307 with 172 hits, 25 doubles, 8 triples, 3 home runs, 6 RBIs, 24 stolen bases, and 561 at-bats. Ernest Duff. Harry Jeffries was the right fielder. Jeffries batted .288 with 78 hits and 271 at-bats, 13 doubles, 2 triples, 2 home runs, 8 RBIs, 10 stolen bases, and 36 walks. And Jeffries played for the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1923, the Cleveland Browns in 1924, the Cleveland Elites in 1926, and the Cleveland Tigers in 1928. Harry Jeffries. Now, the bench players included Willie Miles, who played outfield, first base, and third base. He batted .195 with 16 hits and 82 at-bats. Scored 10 runs, had a double, 4 RBIs, 12 walks. Miles played for the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1923, the Cleveland Browns in 1924, the Cleveland Elites in 1926, and the Cleveland Hornets in 1927. Willie Miles. Roy Tyler was an outfielder. Batted .224 with 17 hits and 76 at-bats. Scored 7 runs, had 2 doubles, 4 triples, an RBI, 3 stolen bases, and 2 walks. Tyler played for the Chicago American Giants, the Cleveland Elites, and the Cleveland Hornets between 1925 and 1927. And he was born in 1899. Roy Tyler. Eddie Watts played some second base, shortstop, first base, and third base. He batted .259 with 15 hits and 58 at-bats. Scored 3 runs, had 7 doubles, and 3 walks. Played for the St. Louis Stars, and Cleveland Hornets between 1924 and 1927. And he batted 9th in the order in 1926 with Cleveland. For his career, he batted .213 with 74 hits, 16 doubles, 4 triples, 9 RBIs, and a stolen base in 347 at-bats. Eddie Watts. Edward Milton played a variety of positions, outfield, second base, first base, catcher, and pitcher. He batted .268 with 11 hits and 41 at-bats, scored 4 runs, had 2 doubles, a triple, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, and 4 walks. As a pitcher, he had no decisions. In 4 innings pitched, 6 runs allowed, and a strikeout. Milton played for the Cleveland Elites, the Cleveland Hornets, and the Cleveland Tigers between 1926 and 1928. For his career, he batted .213 with 74 hits, 16 doubles, 4 triples, 9 RBIs, a stolen base, and 347 at-bats. Edward Milton. John Barnes played some catcher and first base. He batted .250 with 10 hits and 40 at-bats, scored a run, had a double, and 4 walks. Barnes played for the Cleveland Tate Stars, Cleveland in 1922 and 1923, the Cleveland Browns in 1924, Cleveland Elites in 1926, Cleveland Hornets in 1927, and the Cleveland Tigers in 1928. John Barnes. Andy Harris played some third base, second base, and first base. He batted .333 with 12 hits and 36 at-bats. He scored 5 runs, had a double, an RBI, 2 stolen bases, and 2 walks. Harris played for the Hilldale, Pennsylvania Giants, the Pittsburgh Stars of Buffalo, the Pennsylvania Redcaps of New York, the Newark Stars, New York Lincoln Giants between 1917 and 1927. He was generally a light-hitting third baseman. He was born in 1896 in St. Helena, North Carolina, and died in 1957 in New York, New York, at age 61. Andy Harris. Charles Woolridge played some shortstop, first base, and outfield. He batted .189 with 7 hits and 37 at-bats. He scored 3 runs, had a double, a triple, a stolen base, and 2 walks. Woolridge played for the Cleveland Elites and Cleveland Tigers between 1926 and 1928. He was born in Houma, Louisiana. For his career, he batted .210 with 17 hits, a double, a triple, a stolen base, 9 walks in 81 at-bats. Charles Woolridge. Cotty Spearman played catcher, outfield, second base, third base, and shortstop. He batted .300 with 9 hits and 30 at-bats, scored 2 runs, had 2 RBIs, and 5 walks. Did a little pitching. He had no decisions in 2 1/3 innings pitched, 1 start, and 6 runs allowed. Spearman played for the Brooklyn Royal Giants, Cleveland Elites, the Homestead Grays, the New York Lincoln Giants, the Pennsylvania Redcaps of New York between 1919 and 1931. He was a good hitting catcher and generally hit 5th in the 5th spot for most of his career. Cotty Spearman. James Leonard, also known as Bobo Leonard, played outfield, first base, and pitcher. Batted .250 with 7 hits and 28 at-bats. Scored 3 runs, had a home run, 2 RBIs, and 2 walks. Leonard played for the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1922 and 1923, the Cleveland Browns in 1924, Cleveland Elites in 1926, the Cleveland Hornets in 1927, and the Cleveland Tigers in 1928. James Bobo Leonard. Robert Baldwin played some second base and shortstop. He batted .200 with 5 hits and 25 at-bats, 2 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, and a walk. Baldwin played for the Indianapolis ABCs, the Cleveland Elites, and the Detroit Stars between 1925 and 1926. Robert Baldwin. Ed Norman, also known as Alton Norman, played some shortstop. He batted .087 with 2 hits and 23 at-bats and scored 2 runs. He played for the New York Lincoln Giants and the Cleveland Elites between 1920 and 1926. Norman was an erratic outfielder, a showboater. He was wobbly on defense and weak at the plate, and born in 1901. Ed Alton Norman. Joe Ransom was a catcher, played a little bit, batted .105, had 2 hits and 19 at-bats, scored a run, and had a triple. And his pro baseball career was just with the Cleveland Elites in 1926. Joe Ransom. Goldie Davis was a pitcher and outfielder. He batted .500 with 4 hits and 5 at-bats. In 8 at-bats, he scored a run, had a double, and 2 walks. Davis played for the Indianapolis ABCs and Cleveland Elites between 1924 and 1926. He had a light complexion, and for his career, batted .385 with 15 hits, 4 runs, 2 doubles, a triple, 3 RBIs, 6 walks in 39 at-bats. Goldie Davis. Player by the name of Donthier, just one. Now his first name is unknown. He batted .667 with 2 hits and 3 at-bats. Guy named Donthier. There was another player with no first name. Last name was first name is unknown. His last name was Dearborn. He had a batting average of 1,000. Batted once, had a hit, and scored a run. Guy named Dearborn. Another player whose first name is unknown. His last name was Hinkie. He also had a batting average of 1,000. 1 hit and 1 at-bat and also a walk. A guy named Hinkie. Sam Jackson was a catcher, outfielder, and first baseman. He batted once, did not have a hit. For his career, he played for the New York Lincoln Giants, the New York Lincoln Stars, Pennsylvania Giants, the Pennsylvania Redcaps of New York, the Newark Stars, and Cleveland Elites between 1919 and 1926. He was a reserve catcher and played most of his career for New York City teams and was good on defense. Sam Jackson. Another player whose first name is unknown, his last name was Neff, N-E-H-F. He was a pinch hitter and had an average of 1,000. He batted once, had a hit, which was a single. And his Negro National League baseball career was just with the Cleveland Elites in 1926, a guy named Neff. Now, the pitching staff, John Johnson was the ace pitcher. Johnson batted .282 with 11 hits and 39 at-bats. He scored 2 runs, had 3 doubles, a home run, 3 RBIs, and 2 walks. His pitching record was 3-10, 13 starts, 100 2/3 innings pitched. He allowed 78 runs and had 53 strikeouts. Johnson played for the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1922, the Cleveland Browns in 1924, the Cleveland Elites in 1926, the Cleveland Hornets in 1927, and the Cleveland Tigers in 1928. John Johnson. Grover Alexander was second in the rotation. They called him Buck. He batted .105 with 2 hits and 19 at-bats. His pitching record was 2-6 with 5 starts, a complete game, and 58 innings pitched, 38 runs allowed, and 28 strikeouts. Alexander played for the Chicago Giants, Detroit Stars, Indianapolis ABCs, and Cleveland Elites between 1923 and 1926. For his career, he batted .146 with 22 hits, 14 runs, 4 doubles, 2 triples, 5 RBIs, 6 walks, and 151 at-bats. His pitching record was 16-37, 55 starts, 13 complete games, 425 innings pitched, and 151 strikeouts. Grover Buck Alexander. Squire Moore was another pitcher. Moore batted .077 with 1 hit and 13 at-bats. Pitching record was 0-3, 4 starts, a complete game, 40 1/3 innings pitched, 36 runs allowed, 13 strikeouts. He was his given name was Ralph Roy Moore, and they called him Squire. He played pitcher, outfielder, and first base. He was with the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1922, the Cleveland Elites in 1926, Cleveland Hornets in 1927, and the Cleveland Tigers in 1928. He was born in 1897 in Mooresbury, Tennessee. For his career, he batted .237 with 71 hits, 24 runs scored, 5 triples, 5 home runs, 17 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, and 300 at-bats. And as a pitcher, he was 27-35 for his career, 68 starts, 39 complete games, 88 shutouts, 585 innings pitched, and 276 strikeouts. He was born in 1897 in Mooresbury, Tennessee. Squire Moore. Finis Branahan was another pitcher. They called him Slim Legs. Batted .167 with 2 hits and 12 at-bats and a run scored. His pitching record was 0-4 with 4 starts, a complete game, 29 2/3 innings pitched, 29 runs allowed, and 10 strikeouts. Branahan played for the Cleveland Tate Stars in 1922 and 1923, the Cleveland Elites in 1926, and the Cleveland Hornets in 1927. Finis Branahan. George Brannigan was another pitcher. He played some outfield. Batted .286 with 2 hits and 7 at-bats, scored a run, had a home run, and 2 RBIs. His pitching record was 1-0 with 1 start and 26 innings pitched, 31 runs allowed, and 10 strikeouts. Brannigan played for the Cleveland Elites and Cleveland Hornets between 1926 and 1927, and his career average was .357 with 5 hits and 14 at-bats, a home run, and 2 RBIs. Career pitching record was 1-4 with 4 starts, a complete game, 42 innings pitched, and 18 strikeouts. George Brannigan. Willie Spearman was another pitcher. Spearman batted .310 with 26 hits and 84 at-bats. He scored 11 runs, had 3 doubles, a triple, a home run, 6 RBIs, a stolen base, and 3 walks. And he played for the Memphis Red Sox, Cleveland Elites, Cleveland Hornets, the Nashville Elite Giants, and St. Louis Stars between 1923 and 1929. His career record was 1-2 with 3 starts and 24 innings pitched, allowing 33 runs and 8 strikeouts. He was born in 1899 in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. For his career, he batted 64 times. He had 64 hits and 230 at-bats, Scored 25 runs, had 8 doubles, 5 triples, 4 home runs, 23 RBIs. As a pitcher for his career, he was 20-25 with 49 starts, 26 complete games, 4 shutouts, 370 innings pitched, and 171 strikeouts. Willie Spearman. Eddie Walls was another pitcher. It's also known as Eddie Wall. He batted 5 times, did not have a hit. Pitching record was 0-3 with 3 starts, a complete game, 17 2/3 innings pitched, 31 runs allowed, and 7 strikeouts. Walls played for the St. Louis Stars, Cleveland Elites, and Cleveland Hornets between 1925 and 1927, and was considered a marginal player. Buddy Fields was another pitcher. He batted .333 with 2 hits and 6 at-bats, scored a run, and had a double. Pitching record was 0-2 with 1 start, 10 1/3 innings pitched, 21 runs allowed, and 6 strikeouts. Fields played for the Cleveland Browns in 1924, Cleveland Elites in 1926, Cleveland Hornets in 1927, and the Cleveland Stars in 1932. Buddy Fields. Dimps Miller was another pitcher. They called him Dempsey. He was a pitcher, outfielder, and he managed in his career. He batted once and did not have a hit. His pitching record was 0-2 with 3 starts and 7 innings pitched, 12 runs allowed, and 2 strikeouts. Miller played for the Kansas City Monarchs, Cleveland Elites, Cleveland Hornets, Cleveland Tigers, Nashville Elite Giants, the Cleveland Cubs, Birmingham Black Barons, the Newark Browns, the Memphis Red Sox, Detroit Stars, and Detroit Giants. In a long career between 1926 and 1945. In 1926, he missed the postseason championship series because he was shot in his pitching arm by his wife. Very terrible. He was born in 1897 in Omaha, Nebraska. Dimps Miller. And finally, Howard Black was another pitcher. Black batted once, did not have a hit. He had no decisions as a pitcher, 3 1/3 innings pitched, and 3 runs allowed. And his Negro League baseball career was just with the Cleveland Elites in 1926. Now, for the 1926 season in the Negro National League, or the Negro League Baseball, the best hitter was Martin DeHigo of the Cuban Stars East. And the top pitcher was Rats Henderson, who pitched for the Atlantic City Bacharach Giants. Now, after the season, in the postseason, there was a playoff between the top 2 teams in the Negro National League, and the second place Chicago American Giants defeated the Kansas City Monarchs for the opportunity to play in the Negro World Series, and they faced the Eastern Colored League champions, the Bacharach Giants of Chicago. And the Chicago American Giants won the 1926 Negro League World Series 5-4. So that's the story of the 1926 Cleveland Elites, who had a tough year, but it was nice that we had a Negro League team in 1926. God bless the fellows who played for the Cleveland Elites in 1926 and everyone else associated with the team, including the fans, especially the Civil War veterans, Spanish-American War veterans, and First World War veterans. Captains of the Cuyahoga, lovers of Lake Erie, Terminal Tower Power, fans of the Free Stamp statue and the Fountain of Eternal Life, Severance Hall stalwarts, Euclid Avenue electricity, First Energy Stadium friends, Progressive Field pals, Quicken Loans arena enthusiasts, Cleveland Museum of Art enthusiasts, Tribe, Browns, Cavs, Monsters, and Gladiators rule. Cleveland, City of Champions. Cleveland is the best location in the nation on the north coast of America. New York is the Big Apple. Cleveland is a plum. Before you know it,
I want you to come by B&B Detail Shop. If you need your tires cleaned, you need your car cleaned, you need the inside cleaned, this is the place to be. 1850 East Houston Street. Come on down. We're going to show you love as we love to wash on your car.
Nobody does it better. They can come closer than close. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to On Assignment TV. Make sure you go check us out at onassignmenttv.com. That's onassignmenttv.tv, onassignment.tv. Thank you.